It is the middle of the afternoon, and the heat inside the tent is enormous. A thick, close heat that smells of salt and resin, and something sweeter underneath that you are trying very hard not to think about. You are kneeling on a reed mat on a floor of packed earth, close to the great slow river, and the canvas walls of the workshop breathe in and out in the wind coming off the water. In front of you, laid out on a long slanted table of stone, is a body, a person, someone who, a few days ago, was alive and loved, and is now given into your hands and the hands of the men around you to be carried across the most important journey a human being ever takes. Your fingers are raw and white and stinging, because they have been packed in natron, a harsh, dry salt, for hours, and the men here have set you, the youngest, the newest, to the humblest and most exhausting work there is. Above you a man stands very still, and where his face should be there is the long black snout and tall ears of a jackal, a mask, the mask of a god, and from behind it a low voice is speaking words you are only beginning to understand. And this is where you are, and it is day one. Look around this place for a moment, because there has never been anywhere quite like it. This is a wabet, a workshop of embalming, sometimes called the pernefer, which means, and I am not making this up, the beautiful house or the place of purification. It sits out here apart, near the river, often in tents, and there is a plain and practical reason for the tents, which is the smell, because the work that happens here takes 70 days from start to finish, 70 days, and for a great deal of that time you are working with a body in the heat of Egypt. So they keep it out here, away from the town, by the water and the wind, and into this hot, strange, reeking, holy tent they have brought you, an apprentice, the lowest of the low, and they are going to teach you over these 70 days how to do the single most sacred piece of craftsmanship your entire civilization knows how to do. You have seen this before, or you think you have. The mummy, the bandages, the gold mask, the cursed tomb, the ghoul in the dark doing something disgusting to the dead. That is the picture in your head, and here you are, inside it, kneeling in the salt and the resin with a jackal-headed priest standing over you and a person laid out on the stone, about to learn the craft with your own 2 hands. And I am here to tell you, before this day goes any further, that you would not last a week. Not one. And almost everything you think you know about the work you are about to do, about what it meant and why, and what it actually was, is so much stranger and so much more careful and so much more human than the horror story ever let on. So kneel back down, steady your hands, and let me walk you through the hardest week of your life. My name's Marcus, and I should introduce myself, because I am the sort of man who once spent an entire weekend trying to preserve a supermarket fish in a tray of washing salts, purely to understand what natron actually does to flesh over time. And the answer is that it works, and that it is deeply, deeply unpleasant, and that my wife B has asked me in writing never to do it in the kitchen again. I used to teach history to teenagers who mostly wanted to be anywhere else, and when the textbook failed me, which was constantly, I took up the strangest hobby a grown man can have, which is going out and actually living the past, the heat, the labor, the smell, the endless careful repetition of it, all of it on purpose, to feel from the inside what a page can never tell you. And of all the worlds I have crawled into, this one is the one people get most wrong, and the one that moved me the most once I understood it. Because the Egyptian embalmer is handed to us as a ghoul, a creepy figure doing grim, disgusting butchery on the dead in the dark. And the truth, when you actually climb inside the work, is not a ghoul at all. It is a priest, a craftsman, a specialist near the very top of the sacred professions of his world, performing with his hands, the most important and most hopeful act his religion knew how to perform. And you, with your squeamishness, your short attention span, your quiet certainty that this would all just be gross, you would have broken under it and misunderstood it before the week was out. Let me prove it. First, we have to kill the fantasy because you smuggled one in with you, whether you meant to or not. You have the picture in your head. The embalmer as a morbid weirdo. A man who works with corpses because there is something wrong with him, doing repulsive, secretive, ghoulish labor that decent people would never touch. That is the image, and it is almost exactly backwards, because the work of an Egyptian embalmer was not shameful, hidden, low labor. It was, by the reckoning of that world, one of the most sacred crafts a person could practice. The embalmer did not stand at the bottom of society. He stood at a hinge of it at the exact point where a human life ended, and if the work was done right, a human eternity began. He was a ritual specialist, a theologian who worked in salt and linen and resin instead of words. The whole thing was drenched in prayer, in precise religious rule, in the names of gods. You did not put on this role because you were strange and no one else would. You put it on because it was holy and difficult, and it mattered more than almost anything else a person could be trusted to do. Hold on to that because it is the whole story. So let's start with the honest question. Who were you before you knelt on that mat with the salt in your fingers? Who actually did this work? You were an apprentice in a craft with ranks and rules and a hierarchy as strict as any priesthood, because that is essentially what it was. At the top of the tent stands the man in the jackal mask. He is the Huri Seshta, which we can loosely render as the overseer of the mysteries, a lector priest, the one who reads and directs the rites. When he puts on that long-snouted black mask, he is not playing dress-up. He is becoming, for the length of the ritual, the god Anubis himself, the jackal-headed god of embalming and of the dead, the divine embalmer, the one who, in the sacred story, first did this work on the body of a god. So the man giving the orders in this tent has, in a real ritual sense, stopped being a man. He is the presence of a god, standing over the work, making sure every word and every wrapping is correct. Below him are the specialists. There are the bandagers, the wediu, the masters of wrapping, who will, near the end of all this, spend days winding hundreds of yards of linen with an artistry you cannot yet imagine. And there is one more figure, and he is the strangest of all, and we will come back to him. The cutter, the one whose single terrible job is to open the body. And then beneath all of them there is you, the apprentice. You fetch, you carry, you pack salt, you clean. You hold things and hand things and learn by watching and by doing the humblest parts, a craft that takes years to truly master. You were not raised to be comfortable in this tent. You were raised to be useful in it and reverent in it, and to slowly, over years, be trusted with more. That is the person you are this week. And now let me show you the work, because the work is where you'd break first. So here is the shape of the 70 days, and I am going to walk you through it plainly, and with restraint, because the details can be handled with respect or handled like a horror film, and I would rather you understand it than flinch at it. It begins with washing. Before anything else, the body is purified. It is carried down to the river, or washed with water from it, cleansed with natron solution, made ritually pure, because everything that follows is a sacred act, and it begins, as sacred acts do, with purification. That word purification is not decoration. It is the whole frame. This is not a butcher's shop. It is, in their eyes, a temple with a body in it. Then comes the part people always ask about, and I will tell you honestly and then move straight on. The brain is removed. A slender hooked bronze instrument is passed up through the nose. and the brain is taken out that way. And then, and this is the part that tells you everything about how differently these people saw the human body, the brain is simply discarded, thrown away, considered unimportant, because to the Egyptians the brain was not where you lived. It was not where you thought or felt or were yourself. It was, as far as they were concerned, stuffing. The seat of the person was somewhere else entirely, and we will get to where, because it is the single most beautiful detail in this whole process. Then the incision. Here the strange figure steps forward, the cutter, and with a blade of obsidian black volcanic glass, sharper than any metal, sometimes called the Ethiopian stone, he makes a single cut in the flank, the side of the body, an opening through which the work of the interior can be done. And through that opening are removed 4 organs: the lungs, the liver, the stomach, the intestines, and these are not thrown away like the brain was. Oh no, these are treated as precious. These are washed and dried in natron just as the body will be, and preserved, each one in its own special container. And this is where the gods come in quietly, and it is lovely. Those 4 containers are the canopic jars, and each one is under the protection of one of the 4 sons of Horus. The liver goes to Imseti, who is shown with a human head. The lungs go to Hapi, shown as a baboon. The stomach goes to Duamutef, shown as a jackal, and the intestines go to Kebesenuf, shown as a falcon. 4 organs, 4 gods, 4 guardians, each keeping safe a piece of the person for the eternity to come. You are not throwing away a body. You are carefully disassembling a human being for safekeeping, and handing each precious part into the care of a specific god by name. And now the detail I promised you, the one that turns the whole thing from grim to breathtaking. Of all the organs, there is one that is deliberately, reverently, left exactly where it is, left inside the body, and that is the heart. Because to the Egyptians, the heart was everything the brain was not. The heart was the seat of thought, of feeling, of memory, of conscience, of the self. The heart was you, and it had to stay with you because of what waited on the other side. In the afterlife, in the great hall of judgment, your heart would be placed on a scale and weighed against a single feather, the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of truth and order and rightness. If your heart was light, unweighed down by a life of wrong, you passed on into eternity. If it was heavy with wrongdoing, something waited to devour it, and you were simply, finally, gone. So the heart had to stay. You could not go to your own judgment without it. The embalmer, kneeling in that hot tent, was making sure that when this person stood before the scales of the gods, they would have their own heart in their own chest to be weighed. Tell me that is butchery. It is not. It is care of the most extraordinary and tender kind. Now the longest part, the part that eats up most of those 70 days, and it is the part I set you to when you first knelt down. The drying. The body is packed, inside and out, in natron, that natural salt that comes from a dry valley called Wadi Natron, and then it is buried in it, covered over completely and left for about 40 days. 40 days, so that every last trace of moisture is drawn out of the flesh, because moisture is what allows a body to decay, and a dry body does not rot. A dry body can last for thousands of years, as we know, because we are still finding them. This is the science underneath the religion, and the Egyptians worked it out by patient observation over a very long time. Your raw, stinging, salt-burned hands, apprentice, are the hands that pack and check and turn that natron. It is hot, heavy, endless, reeking work, and it is the humblest and most essential job in the tent, and it is yours. And then after the 40 days, the body is lifted out, dry and light and utterly changed, and now the beautiful work begins. It is washed again. It is anointed, rubbed with precious oils and fragrant resins and spices, both to preserve it and to make it holy and sweet. It is padded and packed with linen and sawdust to restore its shape, to make it look once more like the living person it was. And then, the wrapping. The bandagers take over, and over days they wind the body in hundreds upon hundreds of yards of fine linen, layer upon careful layer. And here is the part I love. Tucked between those layers, at exactly the right places, following exactly the right rules, they place amulets, small sacred charms, protective symbols, each with its own meaning and its own power, a scarab here, a particular sign there, each one shielding a part of the body, each one placed while words are spoken over it. Because the whole time the wrapping is happening, spells are being recited, prayers and instructions and words of power from what we call the Book of the Dead, the great collection of texts meant to guide and protect and empower the dead person on the journey through the underworld. So every wrapping is a prayer. Every amulet is a shield. Every layer of linen is theology. You are not mummifying a corpse. You are building, with your hands, a vessel fit to carry a soul into eternity and arming it, charm by charm and word by word, for everything it will face on the way. Now let me come back to that strange figure I told you to remember, the cutter, the one who makes the flank incision, because there is a detail about him that is so odd and so revealing that it changes how you see this entire tent. According to an old account, when the cutter had made his cut, when he had opened the sacred body, the other men would turn on him, curse him and drive him away, pelting him, chasing him off. He had to run. This is recorded by a Greek writer, Diodorus Siculus, so treat it with some care, as we will treat all of it, but sit with what it means if it is even half true. The man who opened the body was ritually cursed for doing it. Why? Because even though the cut was necessary, absolutely necessary, to do the sacred work at all, it was still a wound upon a body that was becoming holy, a violation of a person who was becoming, in a sense, a god. And so the community acted out its horror at the wounding, cursed the one who did it, and drove him off, even though they had all agreed it must be done. Do you feel how far this is from a ghoul who does not care? This is a world so reverent toward the body of the dead that even the man doing the one unavoidable cut had to be ritually blamed for it. That is not disregard for the dead. That is the opposite. That is a reverence so intense it needed somewhere to put its own discomfort. And here is something that will surprise you, because it makes this whole sacred, cosmic, God-drenched process suddenly very human and very familiar. It came in price tiers. According to the Greek historian Herodotus, who wrote about Egypt in his histories, the embalmers offered 3 levels of service. There was the finest, most elaborate, most expensive method, the full treatment, everything I have been describing done to the highest standard. There was a middle option, cheaper, simpler, using shortcuts in the process. And there was a third, the cheapest of all, a basic treatment for the poor. When a family brought their dead to the embalmers, so Herodotus tells us, they would be shown the options, and they would choose according to what they could afford, and then the price would be agreed and the work would begin. There is something almost unbearably human in that. Grief and love and eternity itself, and also a bill, because everyone died, and everyone wanted the journey done right, and not everyone had the same to spend. Immortality, it turns out, had a price list. Now I can feel some of you getting ready to doubt me. And good, you should, because this subject gets mangled constantly, dressed up in either mummy movie nonsense or lurid horror. And I would rather you trust the careful true version than a punchy false one. So let me tell you where the anchor is. A lot of what we can say about the sequence of the embalming comes to us in part from that Greek historian Herodotus, in Book 2 of his Histories, who visited Egypt and wrote down what he was told, including those 3 prize tiers, and we treat him carefully, because he was a visitor writing about a foreign land, and he got things wrong as well as right. And for the modern, rigorous, hands-on understanding, the name you want is the Egyptologist Salama Ikram, who is one of the world's leading scholars of mummification, and who has done more than almost anyone to reconstruct, test, and truly understand how this was actually done, and what it meant. These are the people who spend their lives on this, carefully and humanely, and they take the Egyptians seriously as brilliant, thoughtful human beings, which is the whole trick of understanding any people at all. And let me keep the promise I make every single time, because getting it right matters to me more than a good story. Our picture of this is stitched together from difficult and uneven sources, from the physical evidence of the mummies themselves, from a handful of ancient texts, from later Greek visitors like Herodotus and Diodorus who were outsiders looking in, and from modern experiment and analysis. And the method changed enormously across thousands of years of Egyptian history, so there was never one single fixed recipe, and scholars argue hard and honestly over the details, the timings, the exact steps in this or that period. So hold the fine points loosely, but the load-bearing beams, the roughly 70 days, the natron drying, the removal and separate care of the organs in the canopic jars, the heart left in place for the weighing, the wrapping in linen with amulets and spells, and above all the reason for all of it, those are the beams I would trust. Those are the things that make the whole thing make sense. So here is the turn. Here is the thing that flips this entire story inside out. The thing that took me far too long to actually feel rather than just read. To us, from the outside, mummification looks like grim, clinical butchery. A body taken apart, dried out, packed and wrapped. An unpleasant industrial process performed on the dead. But that is not what was happening in that tent at all. What was happening in that tent was the manufacture of immortality. Follow the logic because it is beautiful once you see it. To the Egyptian, a person was not a single simple thing. You were made of parts, a body, a name, a shadow, and several kinds of spirit, and for you to live forever, all of those parts had to survive and be reunited beyond death. And the body was the anchor of the whole arrangement. The spirit needed a home to return to. If the body rotted away to nothing, the person had nowhere to come back to, and the whole eternity fell apart. So preserving the body was not morbid. It was the exact opposite of morbid. It was the one indispensable act that made eternal life possible at all. And the goal of all that work, all 70 days of it, had a name. The finished, transfigured, preserved body was called a sa, not a corpse, not a mummy in our grim sense. A sa, a glorified, divine, eternal body, a person remade into something imperishable and holy, fit to live forever among the gods. That is what you were making in that tent, apprentice, with your salt-burned hands and your reverence and your 70 patient days. You were not disposing of the dead. You were transforming a human being into an eternal, transfigured, divine thing. You were quite literally, in your civilization's own understanding, manufacturing immortality by hand, one body at a time. Now, suddenly, kneel back down on that reed mat, with the natron stinging your fingers and the jackal-masked priest murmuring above you, and feel how completely different it is. This is not a horror. This is the most hopeful work in the world. Every hour you spend, every organ you set gently into its God's jar, every yard of linen wound with a prayer, every amulet placed between the layers, is you helping a human being cross safely into forever and stand before the scales of judgment with their own true heart in their chest. You are not a ghoul in a tent. You are a maker of eternity. That is not disgusting labor. That is the single most important thing your entire civilization believes a person can receive. So let's be honest about where you specifically would break this week. And notice how little of it is the squeamish part you feared. It starts with the body, yours this time, the living one. The heat inside that tent, hour after hour, in the Egyptian sun, by the river. The smell which no description prepares you for, and which does not go away because you live in it. The natron, drawing the moisture out of your own raw hands even as it does its work on the dead, cracking your skin, stinging every small cut you have. The sheer physical grind of it, packing and turning and lifting, the humblest and heaviest labor in the tent, given to you the newest for weeks on end. You who have never done a hard day's physical work in real heat would be a wreck inside 72 hours, long before you failed at anything sacred. Then the precision, because this is not rough work, it is exacting work, every step in its right order, every organ to its right God, every amulet in its right place, every word of every spell correct, because a mistake is not just untidy, it is a soul left unprotected on the most dangerous journey there is. Then the reverence held for 70 unbroken days, the constant awareness that the thing under your hands is not a thing at all but a person becoming a god, and that you must never, for one careless moment, treat it as less. And then, over all of it, the weight. The knowledge that if you do this wrong, you have not spoiled a job. You have cost someone their eternity. Imagine carrying that, not as a story, as your literal responsibility every hour of every day. You would not last a week. And I mean it precisely and not as an insult, not because you are weak, but because you are modern. You have been shaped every hour of your life by comfort, by air conditioning and easy days and a deep, unexamined habit of looking away from death entirely, of never touching it, never smelling it, never sitting with it for 70 patient days. And this work was built out of the exact opposite of all of that, out of heat and labor and unflinching nearness to the dead, and a reverence so total it would exhaust you long before the smell did. You have knelt in the heat and the salt, packed a body in natron with your own raw hands, watched 4 organs set gently into the jars of their 4 gods, seen the heart left in its place for the weighing, learned why the man who made the cut must be cursed and chased away, and begun, in the humblest way, to help build a vessel fit to carry a person into forever. And that's day 1. You're already embalmed. All right, not literally, not on the first day most likely. But the version of you that knelt down in that tent certain this would just be gross, certain these people were morbid and strange, that version is already gone, dissolved somewhere between the canopic jars and the feather of Mott and the terrible, tender logic of a heart left in place for judgment. And now you would have to do the whole thing again tomorrow, and the day after, for 70 days, building eternity by hand. And here is where I turn all of it around onto you, because I did not kneel you down in that hot, reeking tent just to make you grateful for your easy, sanitized distance from death. Though you might tonight think about that distance a little. Whenever I sit with this world, the thing that stays with me is not the bandages, and not even the canopic jars. It is what the whole thing reveals. Because here is a truth that runs under every human society that has ever existed. What a culture does with its dead is the clearest window there is into what that culture believes about being alive. The Egyptians spent 70 days, and their finest craft and their deepest theology and real money on a sliding scale, on the bodies of their dead, because they believed with total conviction that a person did not end, that the body was the anchor of an eternity, that death was a journey you could be lovingly, expertly equipped for. Their care for the dead was, underneath, a vast statement of hope about being alive. So here is the uncomfortable mirror I want to hold up to you, on your side of thousands of years and a very different relationship with death. What does your own era do with its dead, and what does that reveal about what you believe? We hurry it. We hand it to professionals and look away. We keep it behind doors, out of the home, out of sight, wrapped up and dealt with quickly and quietly, so that most people alive today have never once touched a body, or sat with one, or spent so much as an afternoon, let alone 70 days in its presence. Now, I am not telling you that is wrong, but I am asking you to notice it and to ask what it says. What does a civilization believe about eternity when it cannot bear to be in the room? What have we decided happens, or does not happen, that lets us look away so completely, where they could not look away at all? The Egyptians answered the question of death by spending 70 reverent days on it. We answer it mostly by not answering it. And both of those are answers. Both of them say something about what we think it means to be alive. So those are my questions, and I do read the comments, so tell me honestly 2 things. First, now that you know what the work actually was, the heat and the salt and the exacting reverence and the 70-day patience of it, and above all the hope underneath it, could you have done it? Not the ghoul from the movie. This one. The careful, faithful, salt-burned craftsman building a person a doorway into eternity. And second, the mirror one, the one I actually can't stop thinking about. What does the way your own world treats its dead reveal about what you, and the people around you, really believe about being alive? Tell me below, and be gentle with each other down there, because we are all, every one of us, going to be handed across that same threshold one day by someone. I'll be off to explain to my nephew Cody why there is a diagram of 4 jars on the fridge and why one of them, and I quote B worryingly, has a little baboon drawn on it. It is research. It is definitely research. And if kneeling you down in that tent for half an hour made you look at death, and at the living, a little differently, and if you want me to drop you into another world where you also, let's be honest, would not last, then subscribe and come back, because I have always got somewhere stranger to take you. My name's Marcus. Mind your hands in the salt, and be a little braver, tonight, about the one journey every single one of us is going to take.